The rain came softly that night, and she thought it was just another quiet sound in their little house. But it carried something else. A hush that pressed against her chest, like a memory she could not name. Her husband sat by the window, his hands clasped together, and his eyes somewhere far beyond the glass. She called his name, and he turned, with a smile that should have eased her, but it did not. There was a flicker behind his calm, a tremor behind his words. She had always loved how gentle he was, how he never raised his voice or left a promise unfinished. Yet lately, when he touched her cheek, his warmth felt borrowed, as if his skin remembered someone else. She watched him move about the room that night, lighting the small lamp by her side, tucking her blanket, as though the act itself was enough to erase the distance between them. But she knew love could fade without dying, and sometimes loyalty could live while breathing another name. She fell asleep, listening to his steady breath and the soft murmur of rain, not knowing that the sound outside was an echo of a life he once promised to forget. Morning came with the scent of tea and the faint sound of a song she did not recognize. He was humming it while preparing breakfast, his movements careful, almost rehearsed. She asked where he learned the melody, and he said, from an old dream. But the way his eyes darkened told her it was more than that. She looked at him and saw the man she loved, yet behind his gentle smile, there was a storm that had never passed. They ate in silence, the kind that spoke louder than arguments. She remembered when he first came to her years ago, his clothes worn, his heart raw, and his promise, simple, to never look back. She had believed him, because love is built on trust, even when trust is blind. After breakfast, he went to the garden and stood there too long, staring at the wilted flowers, as if waiting for them to speak. She stepped closer and heard him whisper a name, a soft, fragile sound that did not belong to her. She wanted to ask, but her throat closed around the question, because some truths, once spoken, cannot be returned to silence, and some pasts breathe, no matter how deeply they are buried. Days passed, and the quiet between them grew thick like fog. She began to notice small things. A letter burned in the hearth before she could read it, a pendant he wore hidden beneath his shirt, a look in his eyes when the stars came out at night, as though the sky itself remembered him. She followed him once, not out of jealousy, but out of fear that the love she built was founded on a ghost. He walked down to the old docks where the sea sang to itself, and the air smelled of forgotten salt. There he stood by the water, waiting until a woman appeared from the mist, her face pale, her eyes sharp with sorrow. She did not touch him, but the way they looked at each other broke something in her heart. She turned away before they spoke, but her world had already changed. She went home and sat in the dark, her hands trembling against her chest. She knew then that the past he buried was not dead. It was breathing through him, whispering through his silence. And she loved him still. That was the hardest part, to love a man haunted, and to want him to stay, even if his heart was not wholly hers. When he returned that night, his eyes found hers, and he knew she had seen what she was never meant to see. He knelt before her, his voice trembling with truth. He told her of the woman by the sea, a life he had left behind in the ashes of a war. She had been his first love, his first loss, his first promise broken. He had sworn to never speak her name again, but dreams had a way of pulling him back. She listened without words, her tears tracing paths down her face, not from betrayal, but from the pain of knowing love never truly dies. It only changes shape. He said he loved her more than the air he breathed, but sometimes the ghosts of what we once were still reach for us. And she took his hands and told him that love was not about erasing the past, but surviving it together. They held each other until dawn. And when the first light touched their faces, she felt his heart beat steady against hers. Not as a man running from his past, but as one learning to live beside it. And for the first time in many nights, she breathed with him, not in fear, but in forgiveness.